Hello and welcome back to Everything Boats with Captain Frank Lanier, where we discuss boats and boating, from maintenance and repairs to seamanship and safety, as well as everything in between. This podcast is a companion to my YouTube channel of the same name, so if you like and find it useful, be sure to subscribe and please check out my YouTube channel as well, where you'll find hundreds of informative videos on pretty much every boating topic imaginable. So today's podcast is based on a segment of my YouTube channel called Ask Captain Frank. And this is where I take questions from my YouTube channel viewers, customers of my marine survey business, or just people randomly calling me up trying to get me to answer shit for free. So today we're going to be talking about the nut controversy. And came about from a survey I did a couple of weeks ago, and it was on a mid-sized sport fishing boat, and it involves the propeller and the attachment of the propeller to the shaft. You have two nuts, right? You have a jam and a jam nut. And the question I received was, the client said, in the survey report, you said that the nuts were backwards. And I told that to the yard guy, and he kind of muttered and, shook his fist at the sky and stuff. So I'm trying to get a little more information on, why the nuts were backwards. Well, okay, we're going to delve into this, and this is something I see all the time, and let me explain a little bit more about the nut controversy. When you have a propeller and you put it on a shaft, you have two nuts. You have a thick nut and you have a thin nut. One is the jam nut and one is the jammed nut, okay? So you would think this is pretty much a no-brainer, right? You put the propeller on the shaft and then you install the thick nut. This is what you would think. You install the thick nut and crank it down, and then you put the little thin nut on there and you just kind of tighten it up. And the purpose of this thin nut in your mind, or a lot of people's mind, is it just kind of holds that thick nut in place, and that's the way it should be. Well, this is backwards. And again, I see it a lot of times at yards and stuff. I used to argue with them all the time. Now I just kind of, let them go on the way. Because they'd be like, well, we've been doing this way for 50 years. Well, buddy, you've been doing it wrong for 50 years, but who am I to say, right? So let's explain or delve into the proper way you should put these nuts for your propeller. So again, you've got the thick nut and the thin nut. So when you put the prop on, the first nut you should have should be the thin nut. And you put that thin nut on there and you crank it down and you tighten it up and snug it up into place. Now, what you do is you put the jam nut, which is the thick nut, and you tighten that on and you tighten it up to the thin nut. And then you put some pressure and crank it and torque down the thick nut, which is behind the thin nut. Now, I'm going to tell you the reason that you're doing this, right? You've got the thin nut, you got it snugged up, you got it tightened up, and you put that thick nut, the back nut, tighten it down good. When you torque it down against that thin nut, basically what it does is it relieves the pressure of the threads, or the pressure on the threads of that thin nut. So it's taking the load, right? It takes the load from the nut in front of it. And if that's going to be the case, then you want the nut that's taking the load to be the nut that has the most surface area, which is again going to be the thick nut. So the thin nut goes on, put the thick nut on there, tighten it down, and it takes the pressure off of the nut in front of it. It jams everything together, it holds it in place, holds itself in place. But the pressure, the load has been transferred to the rear nut, the thick nut. So with all this said and done, is it a critical issue? No, it's not. Because if it was a critical issue, half the boats in the world wouldn't have any props on. But technically, it's inaccurate. So if I see it during a survey, I tell them, okay, you know what, these nuts are backwards. The next regularly scheduled haul out, or when you pull those nuts to service the prop or whatever, put them on the right way. And that's as simple as that. So that's today's Ask Captain Frank. It's a very contentious subject. Almost comes to blows in a lot of cases with the yards and stuff, because they're pretty adamant about, this is where it is. But when you take it and you break it down and you explain it to them, a lot of times they still don't give a shit. However, technically that's the right way, and they can't say they don't know why it should be that way. So that's today's version of Ask Captain Frank. And again, if you've got a question, you need an opinion on something, man, I got 1 million of them and I don't mind giving them out. So just send it on in and I'll try to help you out. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And if so, and you want to buy Captain Frank a cup of coffee, please click on the support link in the text description below. All monies received, not spent on coffee, will go towards making even more awesome podcasts for my channel. And as always, thank you for your support.